Guys, today on the Hawks Zone, Corbin Smith joins us, Seahawks beat writer from the Emerald City Spectrum, and also the host of Locked On Seahawks podcast. We're excited to have Corbin on today because this has been a whirlwind of an offseason so far, from Geno Smith and DK exit to John Schneider having to pivot and now having a whole new looking offense, and just other free agents as well that John's been just signing away. So, we're going to get Corbin's perspective on all of that. You know, he's boots on the ground guy. He's in the building. So he's going to have some good insight for you guys coming up on that. So on the other side, Corbin Smith. But before we get to that, guys, if you haven't done it yet, go down, subscribe to the channel for us, like the videos, comment on the videos, share the videos. It all helps out the channel. You can also go down, you can buy us a coffee too. That also helps support the channel. And so on the other side, Corbin Smith.
So y'all can sit here and ask me all the questions y'all want to.
Don't you ever talk about me.
Let's go. It's go time, baby.
I'm just about that action, boss.
You ready to go get it. You just like to do it.
That's what it is.
Defense trying to do that. Pass is caught back in. Can't chase it. What a catch! Jackson Smith and Are you kidding me? Baldwin. Oh my goodness, he caught it.
This is the HawksZone Rundown with your hosts, Ryan and Bryce.
Hey guys, welcome back to the HawksZone Rundown. With us today, joining us, we have a special guest, Corbin Smith. He's a Seahawks beat writer from the Emerald City Spectrum. Corbin, we appreciate you coming on here during a crazy busy time for the Seahawks.
Yeah, no problem, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, hey, let's get into it. Talking about latest things that happened. John Schneider had his John Schneider show a couple days back. Mike McDonald joined him, and the guys got into some topics. Obviously, the Geno Smith departure and DK Metcalf, and he had some interesting things. You really saw John being authentic there when they were asking him about Geno Smith and the reasons for the trade. And John said, "Listen, we wanted to keep both guys, and we threw out an offer to Geno Smith." And there just really wasn't a response back. There was really no counter. John figured there'd be a little bit of negotiations. Do you think that came down to just Geno Smith wanting out of Seattle, no matter what the dollar amount was?
The more that we learn about this, guys, I think that is definitely something that could have been going on. But I think you also have to consider here the Pete Carroll effect. And I don't care what anybody says. Pete Carroll was sniffing around this as soon as the Raiders gave him that coaching job. I mean, and I don't blame him. Look who they had playing quarterback. They did not have a quarterback on their roster last year. And Geno Smith, Pete Carroll was the one that gave him the opportunity to be a starter again in this league. Those two have an incredibly close relationship. Geno Smith talked to him a lot during the course of this past season when Pete Carroll was out of the NFL. So it's only fitting that when this all broke down, that the Raiders were the team that said, hey, we'll take Geno Smith. We'll give you a third-round pick. And I think at that point, the Seahawks felt like we just got to get something on day two in return for a guy that's got 1 year left in his contract, getting to be an older quarterback. And then we can try to pivot here quickly because free agency starts in a couple days. And let's be honest, free agency started at the combine. But they had their list of quarterbacks already together. So this was one of the fastest developing situations I've seen with a quarterback who I think the Seahawks absolutely wanted to have back, but they weren't going to be waiting this out into free agency with a guy that had 1 year left in his contract. You either take an extension or we're going to find somebody that we can get locked up for several years and we can create some cap cushion. And so they were able to do that. We'll see if it ends up working out for them or whether this is something they look back upon like, maybe we could have tried a little bit longer to see if we could make something work here. But you do have to wonder how much Pete Carroll had an effect on this. And Geno Smith was wanting to go to Vegas.
And so Corbin, obviously, John was off on the side podium there. And then he also kind of made a comment in regards to DK. They were having a lot of personal discussions, it sounded like, before this all came forward with DK's trade. He thought he could fix it, but in the end, he wanted to be traded. Do you think it was a lot of the same kind of stuff played into the factor with DK? Bit of the money, bit of wanting a reset. Maybe he didn't believe necessarily in what Kubiak's offense was going to be for him. And the last thing I want to ask you is when John made the comment, we want guys that want to be here. Did you find that kind of had like a bit of like almost a venom and uncomfortableness for John and how this situation kind of broke down with both DK and Geno?
Yeah, I think that I don't know if venomous is the word that I would use, but you definitely, the body language, you can tell with John Schneider sometimes. Like, I think he tries to hide his body language, but there's times that you can just tell that he was irked by how this played out, especially with DK Metcalf. I think they were fine with moving off of Geno once they saw how things are going. But DK, I mean, you can't tell me that he wanted to move DK Metcalf. We do know that there were teams that were calling and inquiring, and John Schneider keeps his ears open. He always has. And the fact that these two sides had started talking before the combine and there was a major gap in money at that point, that really was the first domino. I think if the Seahawks would have been like, hey, we got a 5-year, $150 million deal, I think if the Seahawks would have floated that, that probably might have fixed what was going on here. But they weren't going to pay that price tag for him. That was a price point that was beyond what they thought he was worth and what they felt they could afford. So money was the biggest factor here. I think DK Metcalf also felt some pressure from Jackson Smith and Jigba. He would never admit that, but he was not the number one guy anymore. I think that this has become Jackson Smith and Jigba's receiving core. It was not DK Metcalf's. And so even with Tyler Lockett being gone, I think DK Metcalf, and it's ironic because I don't know if he's that guy in Pittsburgh either, with George Pickens being there. It's going to come down to quarterback target distribution, whoever ends up being the quarterback there. But I think money was the biggest factor here, and there had been some frustrations that had been building up behind the scenes. So I think in the end, once he knew, oh, they're at least taking calls about me, I think that just led to that next domino where, well, I went out. And at that point, I felt like they weren't going to get this bridge fixed, and ultimately they didn't. And that's what led to this trade.
Yeah, I mean, do you think some of that, as far as the Seahawks were concerned, when it came down to negotiation, just having that line drawn in the sand at whatever the number was that they were willing to pay him, do you think that had a lot to do with sort of the emergence of JSN, how he came on last season, thinking, hey, this guy actually maybe in some people's minds leapfrog DK as that number one, and there's going to be a point here where we have to extend JSN too. You look at Cincy where they just pay 2 receivers, that gets expensive. Do you think if it wasn't for that emergence that maybe they would be willing to pay sort of similar what he got in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I think if Jackson Smith and Jigba doesn't take a star turn last year, let's say he gets 600, 700 receiving yards a second straight year, and you're thinking he's been solid, but he hasn't been the first-round impact player that we thought he was going to be. I think at that point, then you say, okay, DK Metcalf is the receiver that we are going to be investing that receiver number one money into. But because Jackson Smith and Jigba went out and had the season that he did, and he's only 23 years old, he's still got a lot of room to get better. I think at that point, the Seahawks felt, especially after seeing, I wonder if John Schneider, this is just speculation on my part, but I'm wondering if John Schneider, just based on some of the comments we have heard from him this offseason, if maybe he felt that, maybe we put a little too many eggs in one basket with our wide receiving core the last few years. And that makes what Cincinnati's doing all the more interesting, because you look at the teams that are winning Super Bowls, like those teams typically don't have top 5 priced receivers. You might have guys that are in the top 10, AJ Brown being an exception here, but most teams that are competing for titles, they don't have that super high priced alpha on the outside. So it's kind of interesting. It seems like maybe that dynamic's changing a little bit. And maybe John Schneider felt like, especially after releasing Tyler Lockett, like, maybe we can go back to what it was like when we were going to Super Bowls and we had undrafted guys that were our top 2 receivers. I don't think he wants to go down that road. But the point is, I think he wants to reallocate some of the money. And the fact that Will Fries was getting offered a $17 million a year contract, that tells you, the proof is in the pudding right there, that they were trying to take that money from Tyler Lockett's contract and finally put it into the offensive line.
So with that kind of what you're talking about there, Corbin, and this reallocation, this whole offense now has basically gone through an entire reset at the quarterback position, the receiver room. It looks like potentially with Tevin Jenkins and Lucas Patrick coming in for visits in the next couple of days here, that they may add some veteran leadership in that area. What do you make of this entire offensive reset that Seattle's done? They did it with the defense, bringing in Mike McDonald and a lot of the pieces there. and now they're doing it on the offense. So what's your takeaway from this? Like, what can we expect from this offense going forward?
I don't think you're going to see the same reliance on explosive plays that we have seen the last few years, which honestly, that's not a bad thing. Fans are not going to like it. There's not as many deep balls, but this team really for the last 5 years has been incredibly reliant on those chunk plays. And I think that has cost them a lot. And part of it's been the offensive line. And this is really the caveat in all this, guys. You can go out and get quality receivers. I still think Cooper Kupp, as long as he can stay healthy, I think Cooper Kupp can be a very productive number 2 receiver behind Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think Marquez Valdes-Scantling, you're good for 400, 500 yards and 19, 20 yards of reception. He is going to be that feast or famine guy, but he'll be your big play threat. They've got the tight ends, I think, to be able to move the football in the passing game. I think the run game is going to be better, but the caveat to all this is the offensive line. If the offensive line is no better than it was last year or on par with last year, it's going to be really difficult for Sam Darnold to have anywhere close to the success he did in Minnesota, especially without some of the big play weapons that they are going to be missing. They have got to be able to run the football for this offense to work with this reconstructed offensive roster, because they don't have the pieces to have a pass-heavy unit at this point. They're going to have to be able to run the football. So that's really the caveat here. And that's why I'm watching what's going on with Tevin Jenkins. My understanding is that he's in Seattle right now. That's why he was not on the visit list today. They did visit with Lucas Patrick, another guard, earlier, but I'm watching Tevin Jenkins because when the guy's been healthy, that's the big disclaimer there. But when he's been healthy, he's been a pretty good offensive lineman, and I think he's a good fit for the scheme. There's got to be some kind of a move here to bring in a veteran that can try to round out that interior, because they are going to have to be able to run the football. And I think Clint Kubiak is going to be much more dedicated to trying to make that work than what Ryan Grubb was last year.
Yeah. And, you talk about how John pivoted really quickly, and then, days later, we got our next starting quarterback in Sam Darnold. Do you think that the Seahawks look at him as just another bridge guy, or do you think they believe that, this guy could potentially be the next guy, with a higher ceiling, being younger than Geno Smith by quite a bit? Or is it just a case of a bad free agent quarterback market and he was the best available? How do you look at that situation? How do you think the Seahawks really view Sam?
I think that the Seahawks have an optimistic mindset that Sam Darnold can be the guy. And if he can play like he did last year, there's a lot of the game in Seattle was fantastic. And this is the thing that I didn't think about before they made this move. The guy can just flat out sling it when it's raining. And, Russell Wilson had his issues thrown in the rain. I think Geno at times had issues thrown in the rain. Sam Darnold, I almost wonder if they need to get a machine to make it rain every day at Lumen Field. The guy just slings the pigskin when it's raining. That last touchdown, they had the game winner to Justin Jefferson, stepped up in the pocket, was thrown against his body. That was a ridiculous throw. And it was pouring down rain when that play happened. I think from a fit standpoint in this offense, there's going to be enough carryover from what we saw in Kevin O'Connell's system. It's not an identical scheme. There's going to be a lot more two-back sets, under center stuff, instead of the 11 personnel that Minnesota likes to run. There's going to be a lot more usage of that type of personnel, but a lot of the same route concepts and passing game concepts, play action concepts, there's going to be carryover. And so as long as that offensive line holds up, I still think Geno Smith is a better quarterback right now. But Sam Darnold could be the better quarterback here in a year or two if he is able to thrive in this system and you're able to have the weapons around him and the line holds up enough. There is still a lot of untapped potential there. Geno Smith, you can't really say that with at this stage of his career. He's a finished product for the most part. So I think that's the thing you have to consider there. Maybe this is a small step back initially, but a chance 2 years from now that you could be in a way different place, because Sam Darnold, think about it. He's not going to be 30 when his next contract comes up. So if he has 3 good seasons, you could have your franchise guy. It is very much on the table, but they've also put in mechanisms in the contract that if he comes out and just flat out stinks and it looks like New York Jets version of Sam Darnold, I don't think they'd move on from him after this year because it would set a precedent with the vested guarantees. But after 2 years, absolutely, they could move on at that point. And might be a highly expensive backup next season if they end up in that kind of a situation, just because you don't want to set precedent with players in negotiations. Yeah, we want these vested guarantees. Well, you didn't let Sam Darnold have it. So that's why I'm kind of scoffing at the idea of fans saying, oh, this could easily be one and done. If John Schneider's not here, then I guess so, because it's a different general manager. But if John Schneider's still here, I can't see him doing that because of the repercussions that would come from that with free agency.
So, Corbin, kind of speaking about with this offensive reset, do you think John makes this call to reset the offense this way if he doesn't feel he's at least going to see it through a bit? Do you think he would be more entitled to have kept DK and Geno if he was more on the hot seat than, because everyone's talking about whether John's on the hot seat or not, and how this offense or offseason is so crucial. How do you view this reset in light of that? Like, if it comes out and they're worse, do you think that puts John more in the limelight, or do you think he has a little bit of kind of leeway with the upper echelon of the organization to get it right in another year?
A lot of people don't agree with me on this. I think that he put more pressure on himself. I think he turned up the temperature on his seat. I think that it's a bigger risk but higher reward type move. And John Schneider has done these before, and at times it's worked and at times it hasn't. You have to at least give him credit that he's taken moves like this. But this is an incredibly bold reset to be doing on this side of the football. And maybe he has been given assurances that, hey, we're going to see this through to the end of your contract minimum. But if this blows up in his face, I don't see any way that the Seahawks are going to want to keep him in that position, because he made these decisions. Pete Carroll's not making these choices anymore or involved in them. So I think I'm not going to sit here and say that his seat is really hot, but in your car, when you press the hot seat button, I'd say he's on the second level right now. He was on one before this. That's my take. That's my opinion of the situation, the environment. I just find it hard to believe that this does not work out favorably and they take a big step back. I mean, they've been talking about believing they're an ascending team. If they're suddenly not because of these moves they've made, that falls on the general manager here. So I do think there's an increased amount of pressure on him.
Do you think, as far as taking a step back, if they sort of fall in line with what they've been doing record-wise, 9-8, 10-7, 8-9, is that sort of okay? You know what? We did a reset, and we'll give it another year. Does it have for his seat to get really hot? Is it more like this team's just falling flat in his face and they're winning 5 or 6 games kind of thing?
I think if they win 8 games or less, the seat gets incredibly hot. If they have a losing record, and the reason I'm going to say that, you won 10 games last year with an offense that underachieved. You fired your offensive coordinator. Your defense was top 5 in the NFL in scoring the last 8 weeks. Pretty much the entire group is back, and now you've added DeMarcus Lawrence to that group, Byron Murphy going into year 2. And oh, by the way, you've got 10 draft picks now. You need to take advantage of that draft capital to bring in more impact players to round out this roster. I find it hard to believe that Jody Allen and company are going to be sitting back if they go 8-9, that's okay. Now that's fine. No, they want to be back in the postseason. And I'm sure they okayed these moves thinking, okay, this can open up some money. We can improve the roster. And in the end, it's going to be a net positive. But if they are not in contention, they have a losing record, I think 8-9 could potentially put him in trouble, just because I feel like they have a defense that is ready-made for them to be a contender. The offense has just got to be slightly better than last year. They don't even need to be a top 10 offense. They need to be 12, 13 range. They probably would have won 12 games last year if that was the case. So I find it hard to believe that they're going to go in, well, as long as we're around 500. I don't think that they're thinking that. Fans might be, but I don't think the people in charge of the Seahawks are.
So, Corbin, my last question on this offensive reset, and I know, you've coached football, you're a big running backs guy. How do you look at this running back room in this Clint Kubiak system now for Ken Walker, Zach Charbonnet, Kenny Mack, and George Halani? Do you think that they add another guy to this room in the draft because it's such a deep draft class? And overall, how do you think this offense is going to work going through the running backs now instead of through the pass game that it has the last few years?
So first part of your question, I'll be really surprised if John Schneider cannot resist taking a running back out of this class, because I've been in this business now for 12 years. And look, John Schneider has always been really guarded about draft position groups. I don't know that I had ever heard him just openly gush about a position group the way that he did at the combine with the running back group. And he's completely right. This is the deepest, most talented running back group that I have seen in the 12 years that I've been evaluating college prospects for the NFL. There's been some good groups, but I think you have the best running back that I've ever scouted in Ashton Genty. You've got 2 or 3 other guys that could be first rounders, even in today's NFL. I mean, that's the kind of talent we're talking about here. Day 2, you can get some absolute studs. And I think day 3, even undrafted, there's going to be some guys that don't get picked this year that 90% of the drafts would have gotten picked at least on day 3. That is how deep this running back class is. So I expect John Schneider is not going to be able to resist. And he's got 2 7th rounders. He could pick up Chris Carson in the 7th round. And Adam, as far as the group that's returning, I think that this new scheme favors Ken Walker III a lot more than last year because, and I talked about this after Ryan Grubb was hired. I did a deep dive on Washington's offenses last year. They became a very gap-centric running team the second year at Washington. I believe it was 56% of their plays were gap runs. They had to resort to that in the second half to get their run game going with the Seahawks. They were better with that gap run game, and I think Zach Charbonnet is the better runner in those systems. But if you're going to be running the wide zone that the Shanahan-Kubiak system is known for, you got to have quick, athletic running backs that can bounce and cut either way on a dime. To me, this is Ken Walker III's system. And so can you keep him healthy? That's a big key. But I think this scheme caters to his skill set a lot better. If you have a better offensive line, that is going to set him up for a lot more success. So if there's a year, and he's going into a contract year, he could be playing for a lot of money this year in Seattle or elsewhere. I think that this is a system that is catered to his strengths. Zach Charbonnet can still run the zone stuff. But I think, last year you can make an argument this system is better for Zach Charbonnet. I am not going to say that right now. And I think Kenny McIntosh is kind of that hybrid guy that can run a little bit of both. And he showed end of the year that he's got some abilities. So I think all 3 of those guys are going to fit in nicely in this offense. But I think Ken Walker III is the bell cow because of the zone-centric nature of this offense. I think they ran 74% zone plays in New Orleans last year. That is going to fit Ken Walker III's strengths better than Zach Charbonnet, in my opinion.
Yeah. Again, like you said, let's just hope he stays healthy because that's obviously been a tough spot for him. But when you look at this free agency period here for Schneider, you picked up Lawrence, which was a bit of a surprise, but he seems to, be covering a lot of bases here. And if Jenkins, comes in and signs, that's a guard there that you think, okay, well, we're sort of filling up all the spots going into the draft. But how would you evaluate and maybe give it a grade so far with this free agency?
I would give them a B, a rock solid B, because I think Sam Darnold, the fact that you're paying him right around Baker Mayfield territory for average per year, and you put some carrots out in front, some incentives like they did with Geno Smith, not quite as many, but it's very similar structure. I think that that's a B by itself. I think that the DeMarcus Lawrence signing is a fantastic one. I'm almost done watching the 4 games he played in last year. The Cleveland game week 1, the dude was literally the best player on the field. It was not Micah Parsons. Like, he had 8 pressures. He had 2 sacks, a forced fumble, blew up a couple runs in the backfield. And the New Orleans game the following week, everybody that watched the NFL, I think the Saints scored 35 points in the first 21 minutes of that game. So everybody's going to say DeMarcus Lawrence didn't play well. You go back and watch the tape. DeMarcus Lawrence had nothing to do with that implosion. New Orleans, Clint Kubiak's smart. He's like, I'm running away from you every play. And that's what they did. And if they did run it at him, they literally had a tight end chipping and then fullback. There were plays, they had 3 guys going to DeMarcus Lawrence because they're like, well, nobody else we have to respect over here. And so they were taking him out of the game plan with their strategy, and he still made a few plays in that game. I think he is still a really good football player, so I like that addition a lot. I think Cooper Kupp, again, has the ability. The injury thing is always going to be a risk with a player like him. But that's a signing that I think, again, is another B. And I think Valdez Scantling, for what they paid for him, The guy is the leader in receiving yards per catch since 2018 among qualified receivers. I mean, he is a bona fide big play threat. You just have to live with the drops because there's going to be some drops. You have to live with the fact he's not going to give you a lot of other tricks, but he's very good at that one trick. And Kubiak got 4 touchdowns out of him in 8 games last year in New Orleans. So we already have some track record there. So overall, I think that this is a rock solid B. The only signing that I have in the C or below range so far is Josh Jones. And I gave that one a C+ because he started games at both tackle and both guard positions, and he's only 27. So I still think there's some untapped potential there with the coaching staff. And he actually had decent numbers when he was in Arizona. The last couple of years, he hasn't looked as good when he's had his chances. But really, I feel like they've done a good job of not overspending. I feel like they've really filled the gaps in terms of, the spots they had on the roster. And they have set themselves up. I took some flack for this article 2 days ago, but I think if they can get Tevin Jenkins or they can bring in another veteran guard like Patrick, I think that they have set themselves up very nicely for the draft because now you don't have to reach anywhere and you really can get best players available with those 10 picks that you have. And that is the ideal world that John Schneider wants to be in.
So with that, Corbin, I'm going to give you 2 quick kind of situations here. What would be the last move in free agency you'd like to see them do and be, okay, we're good in free agency, we're done. And then what would be your first draft pick for the Seahawks at pick 18? Would it be on the offensive side or defensive side come April when the draft's here?
So the first part of that, can you say the first question again? I was thinking about the second one.
First question is, what would be the last free agent move you'd like to see them do? And then you're good with them being done.
Tevin Jenkins. I think if they get Tevin Jenkins signed, nothing against Lucas Patrick. That would be a good consolation prize. But I wouldn't be signing Lucas Patrick as a starter. I think Tevin Jenkins can be an upgrade over what Seattle has had at left guard. I think that he can come in and still has room to get better too. I don't think they need to make any more significant moves after that point. Again, I think with that addition, you would have had 2 guys you've signed to the offensive line with one of them having starter talent. And then you really have set the stage for you to do whatever you want to do in the draft. As far as pick 18, look, I know a lot of people are against the idea of picking a receiver. This is not a great receiver class. It really isn't. I would think that Luther Belton III would be a really good option there because he's a after the catch maestro, fits a different build than the other receivers that Seattle has. Nick Emanuwari from South Carolina. I think Mike McDonald would be like Pete Carroll with a running back. I think that Mike McDonald would be just banging the table like, we need this 6'3" athletic ball hawking safety. Get him for me now. And I think John Schneider would have a hard time passing up on that too. I also will say this. I don't care if DeMarcus Lawrence was signed. If the right edge rusher is there at number 18 and best player available is on the table, there is no such thing as too many rushers. Boye Mafe is a free agent after this year. Nwosu, who knows what they're going to do with him after this year. Derek Hall will be entering the last year of his contract. That is a position that is an underhand need beyond 2025. And there's nothing wrong with having another guy to add to that mix this year. If you have somebody like, say, Mike Green from Marshall or Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, or there's another edge, this is a really fun edge class. They could take one there at number 18, and I think it would be a really smart move. And everybody's going to say, how about the offensive line? If Booker's there, maybe you consider it, but I feel like there's some really good guards they could get on day 2 in this draft. Tate Ratledge being one of them, Donovan Jackson being another. You can still get the guard at pick number 50. I think they have the opportunity to go do. They have 2 second-rounders really quick, so they can get their guard there. I feel like if you're looking at best player available, edge rushers, maybe if Nick Emanuwari drops there to 18, I don't know if he makes it there. Receivers, you could make arguments for any of those position groups. And heck, you could even go DT. I mean, they could use another body in the middle there. So if one of Michigan's defensive tackles falls in your lap at number 18, that might be difficult for Mike McDonald and company to pass up. So I think, again, they're putting themselves in a position they can go a number of ways, and nobody's going to bat an eye because they have built the roster to at least put themselves in a spot where I'm not getting pinned in a corner where I have to draft LJ Collier this year because I didn't do anything at the edge, as just one example. I think they've really put themselves in a position where they can pick best player available, assuming they can get Tevin Jenkins signed here again. I think that is the last linchpin of this free agency, and that sets you up to be able to go out and attack your roster in the draft however you see fit.
But Corbin, you said nothing about taking a quarterback. Don't you think if Jackson Dart somehow falls to 18 that everyone in Seattle is going to want John Schneider to clobber and go run up to the podium and give in the Jackson Dart card? So I'll ask you, do you think Seattle takes a quarterback this year? Do you think
if they do, I think it'll be day 3. I think that they have enough belief in Sam Darnold. And look, Sam Howell's still in the roster, and John Schneider made a good point that I don't know that Sam Howell was ever comfortable with Ryan Grubb's offense. I do think Clint Kubiak is going to do some things that are going to make him more comfortable. Maybe we see a more 2023 like Sam Howell this year running Clint Kubiak's offense. And they like Jaron Hall as well. So if the right guy's there in day 3, if the right player falls into day 2, I guess the draft board falls a certain way. John Schneider could do that. But I just have a feeling that now that they've gotten Sam Darnold, they've got a younger quarterback as a starter. I don't know in this particular class if there's a guy that's going to jump out. If they can take a chance on somebody like a Kyle McCord or Will Howard on day 3, maybe they could go down that road. But I think that now the chances of them drafting one have gone down quite a bit after signing Sam Darnold.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you there. Corbin, awesome conversation. We appreciate you coming on during this busy, crazy time. Before we let you go, why don't you let everyone know watching this channel what you got going on and where everybody can find your stuff.
Yeah, just launched Emerald City Spectrum. You can visit our website, emeraldcityspectrum.com. Just $6 a month. You get coverage for 9 pro and college teams in Seattle. We think it's the best value deal for top-notch journalism coverage in the Pacific Northwest. So make sure to check that out. And obviously Locked On Seahawks 5 days a week with my good friend Rob Morang, available anywhere you listen to your podcasts.
Awesome stuff, guys. Make sure you go over there and subscribe to all that. Links will also be in the description. Corbin, we appreciate it again, and we hope to talk to you in the future.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Corbin.
Thanks, Corbin. Guys, that was Corbin Smith on the show, back in the HawksZone. That was an awesome conversation, man. Just, awesome insight, kind of boom, 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 touched on some topics here. Really got to dive into certain topics, like the Geno situation, tie with Pete, and just sort of overall what he thinks of this free agency class. I like that, because you look at it, and if we do get Jenkins in here and get him signed, you really checked off a lot of boxes. Like, it's not maybe what people expected for the O-line, like everyone expected, but the market wasn't great this year. People have to realize that, Drew Dahlman was on our list. He didn't want to come here. But at least if you get the guard in, like Corbin saying, now you're going to the draft and you've checked off all your boxes. You don't have to reach. You don't have to scramble around. You take best guy available. So, the way he looks at it, man, it's a solid free agency play by Schneider, especially how quickly he had to pivot.
Yeah, that was the one thing, that I never really thought about that fully in my head, is how quickly John Schneider had to pivot off of, okay, I'm going into this mindset. Because I really do believe at the combine, when John spoke and on his couple shows before the combine and everything, he really believed that Geno and DK were a part of this roster. And I truly believe when Mike came out and said, hey, when we were interviewing OCs, like, how are you getting 14 involved? Those are genuine feelings. It wasn't like, oh, we're trying to hide this. Like, that's genuinely how they felt. And I really think, like, in that week at the combine, the tune of those meetings and everything, and Corbin's report about the Packers kind of coming to John and saying, hey, would you move DK? Like, there was obviously some conversations maybe that DK's agent had with the Packers and saying, hey, my client's not the happiest in Seattle or whatever, because when John even made his comment off podium at the Seahawks facility when they introduced Sam Howell, he made the thing of, we had some personal discussions and I thought I could fix this. So clearly there was something that was broken or misaligned that John felt he could try and put back together and wasn't able to. And, Corbin was pretty on point with all that, saying like, hey, look, like, I think it was a money thing with DK. And I think truly with Geno, the Pete Carroll factor played huge in that when the numbers weren't right.
Yeah. And it's funny what you mentioned about, Clint Kubiak and in the interviews, how you getting involved. I mean, you're not, if you were thinking to trade him, I mean, those wouldn't be that specific. No. And when I watched John Schneider the John Schneider show, you could tell that he was authentic. Like you could tell it was like it almost bummed him out that
Yeah.
DK wanted to go. Like it almost bummed him out. You could tell he liked DK Metcalf. And and by all accounts, we don't know him personally, but by all accounts, he seems like a likable guy. Off the field, he's in the press conferences, seems like a likable guy who's good with the press. So and not to mention that he is a game changer. Now, what he's done to pivot. We criticize John, but you got to give him credit when credit's due, and to pivot like he did. And to pivot with his starting quarterback, and if you want to criticize Geno and all his flaws, that's good. But you have to be like, what are we pivoting to if we have to pivot? And the way that they did it so quickly, and then okay, now we trade DK. We bring in an MVS who is no DK Metcalf, but he's your downfield threat. And then you go get a Cooper Cup, and people can get worried about the injuries. And yes, it's a concern, but look at the contract and you look at the amount of money that they have to spend. It's really a non-issue with Cup. The only thing now is, can he stay healthy? Because when that dude is healthy, he can still play a ton of football in this league. And you talk about a route runner and Kubiak and coming across and intermediate routes. I mean, Cooper Kupp's a stud. I just hope he stays healthy because he'll be a lot of fun to watch here in Seattle.
I couldn't agree more. And the fact is, I think he knows he's coming in to be the number 2 to JSN, and JSN's the guy. I also think Cooper Kupp's experience and veteran leadership and all those things he's going to bring to that offense and that receiver room and to JSN, I think he's going to take JSN's game another level that we haven't even seen yet, because JSN is going to get to learn from one of the best slot receivers we've probably seen in the last decade in the NFL, and a guy that's work ethic can't be questioned. So you're going to get that in the room. That's where it's really interesting when you look at the plus and subtractions now of DK and Geno leaving to moving into Sam Darnold and Cooper Kupp is, yes, okay, maybe Darnold isn't the same level of quarterback that Geno is right now, like Corbin said, but he could get there. And then maybe he might even get farther than that potentially if he's got the right pieces around him. And Cooper coming in, like he kind of alluded to and speculated, maybe DK was a little annoyed that it was JSN's room now and JSN was the number 1 guy. Now you got a guy in Cooper Kupp coming in that might be more inclined with, yeah, I'm okay with JSN being the guy, and I will play my role as the number 2 and the check down guy to find those holes and let JSN do his thing. And that's where it's going to be really interesting, because it seems like the guys they've brought into this building now in Seattle are potentially very team-oriented, team-first, overall goal team. Not saying that Geno and DK weren't, but guys that really relay the same message. And I think that's where John's comment of we want guys that want to be here came out. And when I said and used the term venomous, like it wasn't to mean that he was being nasty or anything, but it was just you could see that he was soured by what had occurred. And I think he felt hurt by it, because I think he thought those were 2 guys that had the same mindset as everybody else, but clearly at the end of the day, they were just different and they went their separate ways.
Well, he even mentioned, like, you take it personal at first, and then you have to realize it's business. And I think he was hurt because, like, I go back to, he really liked the guy, like, especially DK Metcalf. I don't think you and I know that he wasn't never really sold on Geno. He kind of go either way on him, but DK was a guy, he drafted him, got him late in the second round. They felt like it was a steal, and he was a polarizing guy. But it is interesting because, look, it is a business, and John knows it's a business. And you come down to, wait a second, JSN's emerging. We have to, if we want to keep this guy around, to Corbin's point, 23 years old, he's young, man. You're going to have to pay that guy. If he has seasons like he did last year and he has another season like that and another, well, you're paying him. So now what's he going to be worth in the open market? You cannot have, and like when I mentioned Cincinnati, that is unheard of in the NFL, because to his point, you look at the past Super Bowl winning teams and even go back, I know it's going back a little bit, but to our Super Bowl winning team and back-to-back Super Bowl teams, we didn't have all this high priced, receiver talent. And because you need to pay other positions. And I think that had to be running through their minds, where this is the hard line. DK, we'd love to pay you this 150 for 5. We would, but we can't. And not, we got to look out, and like John says, football teams first, players are second. And that's just the reality of the NFL salary cap, and what it is. But like you said, I like what he's done to pivot. I'm a lot more happier with this free agency than say last free agency. And you know what? It's a reset. You pulled up on the screen reset. This is kind of a fun time to be a Seahawk fan because it is a new era. It's a reset. This defense is coming on. You got Mike McDonald, now you got Clint Kubiak. We'll see what happens. You mentioned about Sam. I agree. It's like the one thing about him, the ceiling is a lot higher because you know what you got in Geno. So yeah, I mean, I as far as the quarterback, I agree. What are your thoughts on quarterback? You think it's one of those? Not that they're kicking the can, but it's like you got Sam now. There's no real need to go do it early.
Well, it's interesting. So like I read Albert Breer's, article today on the whole Sam Darnold situation to Seattle, and it's a really good read. I highly suggest everyone go read it. But he was saying how Aaron Rodgers was a real potential here in Seattle when they had to pivot. And the Sam Darnold thing is, and I think this is how John sees it, as it's a bridge, but we're hoping it might be a full Sam Darnold bridging to being the franchise quarterback rather than, hey, we're going from Sam to another guy. Like, I think they're prepared to do that, but I think they're more on the optimistic side that they're bridging Sam into being their franchise guy for the next 7 years, for say. Because like Corbin brought up, the end of this contract, he's still only 30, right? Like, you have really changed your quarterback room by getting a guy that's got 6 years of NFL experience at an age under 30 for the price of what you almost paid Geno 2-3 years ago. And in the way that the deal is constructed, you can get out of it if you don't like it. But I think with the quarterback room as a whole and the quarterback position in the draft, I'm really starting to come around to the idea that they could take a guy in day 3. I think that's the sweet spot for Seattle, maybe late day 2, but really in day 3, if there's a guy like a Will Howard or Kyle McCord, or I don't think they're going to be on Tyler Shuck just because of the age factor and now having Sam. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But I don't know if the necessity is there like it was with Geno being 35 this year. And okay, now we really got it. Like, we can reset, like, you've reset your whole clock on the quarterback situation in a way because of Sam's age. Like, and even Sam Howell, like, it was interesting what Corbin said. Like, people thought Sam was going to fit into Grubb's system because it was similar to what he did in college, but Sam really struggled. Kubiak's system and this whole system that is a derivative of the Bill Walsh West Coast is so quarterback friendly. And you can go through a list of quarterbacks that have had success in it that were write-offs in other places and come in and play well in this system. So it's going to be really interesting to see. Maybe Sam becomes a capable backup. I'm not going to say starter, but maybe Howell becomes a capable backup, or Jaron Hall for even. And you're not having to spend that capital on a pick. Or again, like you said, Sam Darnold's ceiling could be higher than Geno's. Not a lot higher, but higher. But his floor is also a lot lower than Geno's was. So that's kind of your play with it, right? Like, it's a bit of a balancing act, and it'll be interesting to see. And this is where you, again, Ryan, what you said, it makes it really interesting to be a Seahawks fan again. We're not stuck in that same thing. We're running it back again. Like, things could be different. It could go one of two ways. It could go really well, or it could go really bad. And maybe next year we're sitting at this time going, okay, the Seahawks are looking for a new GM. They're looking for a new quarterback. Like, there's a whole bunch of things that could be different next offseason, but at least it makes this offseason and this season coming up really exciting for the Seahawks.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point because I know there are the people in the Geno camp saying, no, how can you let this guy go? And we're this close team. But I look at it like, look, you got younger, like you said, you reset the room. And I mean, sure, Clint Kubiak's here, but I just think, for me, I just look at it like I like the reset. I think now this team, you have to build on it. And that's why John's got to nail this draft. Like, he not nail every single pick, but you have a lot of picks. You have to nail something. You got to build this roster up. So, but again, I think this defense is going to get better. So I think we're in a really good position. And like to Corbin's point, and we've said it, this doesn't have to be like the world on fire offense. Just take care of the football, run the offense efficiently, and then let the defense do its thing. take care of the football, run the ball, convert some third downs, and that's it. You don't have to be the hero. We don't need to play hero ball. This defense is going to do its thing. And I think that's what I'm most interested in to see with this new offense. Like, how efficient can it be? I don't expect them to light the world on fire, but we don't need it. And so I think that's kind of what I'm most interested to see in this coming season here.
No, and I totally agree with you. Like, I have liked Sam Darnold since he came out of USC. Like, I liked his game at USC. He went to the Jets. I'm really excited to see what Sam does here, right? Like, I'm excited to see if this new offense and Clint Kubiak's offense really helps him continue on his ascension that he had last year. And also, like, we haven't even really touched on, like, what Corbin said about the running backs. Like, this could be really great for K9. We could see rookie second half of the season Ken Walker again. And, he said, like, Charbonnet may have some, maybe not a best fit for this. But again, we may take a running back in this draft class, and he may come in and be a really good complement to the new system and the way it's running. Like, there's just so many possibilities. Like, I literally cannot wait for draft. Like, the draft, I'm so excited for that. And I'm interested to see, and by the time our listeners hear the show in the next couple of days, maybe Tevin Jenkins is a Seahawk, and we've got our left guard of the, for the starter for next year. And again, it changes how we do mock drafts and everything going forward for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I can't wait for the draft too. It's a great start here. I think John's done a good job. I think he's done a good job from pivoting to bringing in Sam, and I just think that and I love the Cooper Kupp signing, because I just think, yeah, like you said, all the things you said, and it's gonna be good for that locker room. So yeah, things to come. It's guys, this just doesn't stop. Now it's free agency is not over, but it's getting down to that second phase, but hopefully Jenkins signs, and we can just kind of, I think, like Corbin said, that's probably going to be it for the headlines. So and then it's draft focus, because coming up here in a week or so, we're going to be a month away. So now you're really dialing in on the prospects, and we're going to be dialing in on the prospects. So it's going to be exciting. Guys, if you haven't done it yet, go down, subscribe to the channel, and share the videos, like the videos. It really helps us out. And any closing thoughts?
Don't forget, guys, become members of the channel as well. That gives you special perks, like to our apparel store that we've got, where you can get the hats like me and Ryan are wearing, and some of the hoodies and the different clothing we've had. So make sure you guys check that out. And as well, guys, find our stuff over on Field Goals. We're affiliated with the Field Goals website now, so all of our stuff will be over there as well, guys.
Awesome stuff. So that's it for us. Corbin Smith, again, awesome show with Corbin. Make sure you go down and subscribe to all his stuff too. Links will be down in the description. So that's it for us. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.